Okay, so you just missed the most amazing conversation that we are now going to create in real time. That I'm trying to remember exactly how it started, but we were talking about the obligation for commissions to be paid and how they are enforced, and how effectively we're drawing a line between experience and who your team is to make sure that these things happen smoothly for everybody. And this brought us into a conversation of how the lender is involved in communicating to both agents, potentially how the contract that they made in good faith with all their parties can come to fruition financially.
Absolutely.
So we were,
So what's like an example?
Yeah, it was awesome, you had to hear it. Sorry.
If the buyer agent writes into the contract, seller concession of, let's say, $10,000 to cover, whatever, points, closing costs, and broker fees. I don't know if that's allowable or how that's supposed to be structured, but I think Megan, you might have
Oh,
something.
you can, as long as it meets the requirement of the loan. Every loan type will have different seller concession, allowable fees. So you need to look at those limits, and that's why it's very important to work with a mortgage company that understands that. So if you're worried because you're looking at a house that maybe there is no buyer broker fee being offered, that's when you need to talk to the lender about different ways in which we can still finance in your buyer agency fee. So for instance, if someone was they were pre-qualified with me or pre-approved with me and they were putting 20% down, and that seller is not offering any type of buyer agency fee, but you have a buyer agency fee, well then we can look at other ways in which to finance that. Maybe it means putting 10% down, and the other 10% of their funds that they had saved, they can use to pay their buyer agency fee. There's other things that we can look at. Maybe when you make the offer, you ask for seller concessions towards closing costs. So then the money that they had saved for their closing costs can be used towards your buyer agency fee. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
Yeah, so that's why it's more important to work with a team that understands that.
Because there could be more variables for the buyer now about
Absolutely.
how something is going to be applied in terms of whether it's financeable or whether
Right. And it depends on which program and how much money they're putting down. The seller concessions change on
if it's 6 or
yes,
8 or
exactly. 3 to
VA or
5%
something.
down on a conventional. You're only allowed 3% seller concessions. When you go 10% or more, you're allowed 6%. Then when you get into 25% or more, then that changes to even a larger amount. So those are things that you definitely need to talk to your lender up front to make sure. But there are ways around this, and I don't think it's going to be a game stopper in any means.
And I think it makes a lot of sense to have those conversations before you go out to see the house.
Absolutely.
So you know what your out-of-pockets are going to be on that house. Like if Christine has a property and I call her and says, yeah, Jim, the seller's really tight on this, he can't offer any buyer agency compensation, and I've got a I've got a fee of whatever it is. You need to know that,
Absolutely.
so you can tell me, like, this property might not work for them because they're so tight with their monies. Or we may need to restructure this, instead of it being 10% down, maybe they gotta go 5,
Correct.
or maybe we need to see if we can't get a seller concession and build into, and we can
Exactly.
even build it into the loan,
So what it boils down to is, in the end, Jim, if you're operating as a buyer's agent, you are helping a buyer find a house in the price point that they can afford that meets their needs. And anything more than that, you're overcomplicating it somewhat as a practitioner, because this doesn't change any of that.
Absolutely.
Megan helps those people pay for that house in means by which they can handle that payment based on math and reality. And then as a listing agent, let's say Christine, then you are going to make sure that the sellers are getting the appropriate price in the time frame that meets their needs. And nothing about any of that's changed, because that's all I'm hearing. They're just the
Right.
facts.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
But you gotta let everybody in their lane do that,
Right.
and then your trusty title guys are gonna make sure that everything goes the way it should,
That's right.
or else, then nothing happens. Then we're in escrow, and then that's not a good place to be, because then there's vans in the parking lot.
And I think, just to kind of piggyback that, the importance of having the team is there. Having a good buyer's agent who works with a good lender, who works with the title company, so we all have those communications in the background, so that you as the consumer aren't going, okay, I just want to buy this house, what do I do? And you don't have an agent well, who are you gonna ask that question to? You're gonna ask the listed agent? Well, they're not representing you, they're representing the seller.
As opposed to somebody who you've closed thousands of loans with at the closing table, seen them fund those loans, seen these deals come to fruition, co-brokes that you work with, as opposed to the price on the internet.
Those buyers agents' decisions around lenders actually affect the listing agents, because I know if if I see someone, oh, I know that person, I know the company, that they're on the ball, and I got another offer that's competitive, I go to my seller and say, look, this lender, I've worked with this lender, so all those things are considerations throughout the process.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
sellers understand this because they know, oh, cash offer means the money's good. Well, Megan's offer means the money's good.
I was just gonna say that,
But
like,
internet.com, I'll hook you up with mortgage, might not be good.
Exactly.
not that I want to inflate Meg's head at all, but I can actually cite several cases where I said to the listing agent, Megan Merrill's doing the loan for these guys, and they're like, oh, that's perfect. And we've gone to the top of the heap because of the
Yeah.
relationship
Absolutely.
that I as the buyer agent has
Right.
with Meg.
Well, thank you for that, but I think even more so now, you have to be careful about the lender that you're working with, not to say any names, but those online lenders that you can't reach nights or weekends, or maybe they have had you've had a bad experience with because they've missed something, so you wanna make sure you have
All the
everything
listing
up
agents are
front.
worried about closability.
Exactly.
In this market, we're getting offers, and I'm looking at it going, I'm glad they offered that amount, but there's no way we're getting there.
Right, right.
Because what they're
Right.
saying is, I'll pay what it appraises for, and I have no more above that. So you can offer me $1 million for this $400,000 house, but looking at it, I know we're not gonna get there.
Right.
So we're looking at closability, and a solid lender, and a good agent,
Right,
and
right.
and title company.
To pull it all full circle here, so as a seller, so this is why you care about this.
Right.
Because why do I care about a lender, right? I'm not borrowing any money. I'm selling my house. Okay, but this is why the buyer's agent who knows the lender, that can hook your client up with the appropriate people to make sure this gets done properly. Well, what if tomorrow there were no lenders, there were no banks, and all you could do was sell your house to cash buyers? Your value goes straight down.
Right.
And you know
Well-
that, so sellers get it, they just haven't connected the dot that lender and that buyer relationship are critical to maximizing the value. It's called a non-warrantable condo.
And I know, and I'm not gonna speak for Christine, but I assume she's done this too. I've gotten multiple offers on properties, and they're all good, and I've got a couple lenders here that I know that are financing, and I've worked with them before, and so I'm comfortable with that, and then I get one that might be a little bit better, and I don't recognize the lender, and I ask the buyer's agent, have you worked with the lender before? Well, yeah, I have, I work with them all the time. Okay, that's great, do you mind if I make a phone call to them? Because I wanna have a conversation with that lender as well, to know what their credentials are, and to know how many loans they've closed, how long they've been in the, I wanna get a comfortability for my seller, to know that, yeah, if I take $5,000 extra on this contract, that's the same as these other ones, that this person's gonna deliver, and that we're not gonna be getting to the finance commitment date and the thing's gonna blow up.
Or worse, after the commitment date.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I know
The day
Todd,
before
you and I
closing.
probably seen some deals go
Final
sideways
underwriting.
off those one-off lenders,
Yeah, a little bit of an adventure. So
Yeah.
the irony is that this lawsuit aimed at sort of preventing collusion, instead, it's actually giving an incentive to get people to work together.
Perhaps so, I think so.
I'd look at it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, which is what TRID did. TRID was supposed to revolutionize everything and say, oh, no, now it's gonna make it more black and white. And all it did was actually promote local relationships.
Right.
Because the
And I-
more you got people dealing with, people from Massachusetts coming to New Hampshire, suddenly finding out that we charge $750 per thousand on the purchase price, in tax-free New Hampshire,
Right.
if it's not disclosed on the
Yeah,
CD.
it's split, as
Yeah,
opposed to
Right.
mass forces,
yeah, so what is this? And so stay local.
Well, and I think you just hit it on the head with relationships. I mean, I've talked to a few agents that are newer, and they're like, how am I gonna do this now? Like, everybody's gonna want an experienced agent. Well, every agent has experience in some sort of capability that they've done in other markets, right? So it's about the relationship you build with the client, the education that you get from your broker. Just because you're new doesn't mean you're not any good, right? So I wouldn't discourage a new agent from thinking about getting into the business. I wouldn't discourage people from, wanting to be part of this. I would just say, hey, you just gotta get your ducks in a row before you go out there and start saying things that you don't know anything about. Right? You wanna come across as educated. You wanna come across as, hey, I work with this person who might be my sponsor at EXP, or it might be my whatever at one of the other brokerages, and you're gonna get them to come along with me, and I'm gonna utilize their experience, and we're gonna build a relationship together, and we're gonna represent you.
But experience costs money. And to the point you made earlier, Christine, that's the you get what you pay for, right? We were talking about that.
Yep, and this might, all things equal change, and I embrace change, and I am hopeful that, at the end of all of this, that buyers agents will now start getting paid their true worth.
Right.
Yeah.
Agree.
I think you're right. I mean, I can't speak because I'm not in the trenches of the sales, but it's just gonna be that conversation you have with the buyer up front, saying,
Yeah.
hey, this is what the
Right.
conversation's gonna be.
And from an
Mhm.
agent perspective, if we do what we have always done, and that is put the best interest of our consumer at the forefront, nothing is going to change.
Exactly.
And I know Christine's business because we've worked together and we've known each other for so long. You have those initial consultations up front and you connect with them, you find out what the buyer wants. I may go into somebody really wants to work with me and I would sit down and I tell them what I'm gonna do and these are my services and this is the fee that I charge and we go through all of that and I listen to them. I've walked away from clients in the past because it just wasn't gonna match up with us. But I refer them over to somebody else who I think that might be a better fit for them. So I think that those consultations really go well, are really important for the consumer and for the realtor.
And maybe buyers will actually, many sellers will interview multiple agents and see which one they get along with
Yes.
best.
That's a good
Oh,
point.
that's a good
I
point.
think, I'm used to comparing my, and we all have different skills, so whatever my criteria is not theirs, so, but a lot of times, it's almost like you find the house, get the agent by accident. Pick up the phone and that's who you get, almost. But if they're selling, they know it's a huge investment, and they wanna make sure they pick the right person, and I think you'll see more of that with buyers,
I would
saying, you know
agree.
what,
I
I wanna
agree.
sit down and talk to 2 or 3 people, see who I'm comfortable with, is their speed the same as mine, if they come off too anxious or
Right.
too lazy, and I think that you may see more interviewing for the role of buyer's agent than.
Love it.
And in the wonderful world of unintended consequences, we might end up with buyers who are more directed out of the chute, knowing what they're looking for.
Right.
Sure.
That, in that process, I've narrowed down everything and everything just gets a little bit smoother, even more so.
Right.
Provided you're working with experienced people.
I mean, I remember
Right.
back in, the 2012, 13, 14 range where people were loading people up in the cars and driving them to 15 properties. And I always had the opinion, I'm not driving you to 15 properties. Like, I will go out to see 3 of them with you, or 4 of them that day, because when you get past that, they all start looking the same, and you can't
Right.
remember
You
what
get
you
confused.
The one
want,
the
so.
kitchen from House Bay and the yard.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
I
Greatest
know
hits
there's a
compilation.
C and they go, oh, that one doesn't
We don't have
exist.
15 properties to look at
yeah,
anymore.
no,
so-
right. But someday it'll go to that. There's ebbs and flows in the market, and it'll go back to that at some point. And I always had a strong feel with the buyer, like, hey, I want you to know what you want first. Like, what is the purpose of us going out and seeing? Or I want you to know what you qualify for, because if you haven't done a drive-by and know that you don't want that house that's sitting right on that Interstate 93, and that's not the house we're gonna go look at. That's just wasting everybody's time,
Right.
right? Or hey, I really, really wanna go see this house. Well, that house is $400,000 outside of what you can afford. I mean, I'd like to go see that house too. Maybe I'll find a buyer that can afford it, I'll go look at it. No. But the point is like, you have to sit down and have those consultations. You have to sit down and have the communications. You gotta work with a good team. And I think that's kind of what we've wanted to bring together in this whole thing, is that good representation, these changes really aren't changing anything.
Right.
Right.
There it is, full circle.
There it is.
Nailed
There
it.
is.
Nailed it.
Good
Oh,
work, you
all right,
guys.
boss.
Love
Good
it when a
job.
good thing
job,
comes
everyone.
together.